we have some more, you know, it seems like I'm only talking about barriers to intimacy, but unless we recognize the barriers, we can't bring them down, whether they're in ourselves or whether we're seeing them in somebody else. We have to be aware of, awareness is where it all begins, awareness of our own processes, awareness of other people's, then we can work through those things. This energy level here that Fritz Perls called the death layer, I choose to call the implosion layer because it's where we block ourselves from really being ourselves with other people for fear they'll reject us, for fear they'll hurt us, for whatever reason. We block it. We lock in a lot of energy that way, and that's why I prefer to call it the implosion layer, because it's energy that's pushed in on itself. When we do break out of that, and which we'll be talking about in the following segments, when we do break out of that and try to communicate ourselves, all of that energy gets to go out. And we all are involved in cliches, and we all are involved in social roles of different sorts, you see. But at least we're authentically ourselves in those roles then, and we're authentically ourselves even though involved in cliches. Still with me? But what happens when we're talking about that blocked-in area is people only live on these two levels, and we never meet authentically them. For example, one barrier to intimacy is to be a do-gooder. People in my profession, I do psychotherapy, people in my profession and other people helpers very often use that as a means of avoiding intimacy. See? Because what? I'm always so busy helping other people. I'm doing good for you. I always have to be in charge. I'm always a superior person, if you will, you see. In any relationship I come on, I'm going to help you. But I never reveal my own weaknesses necessarily, etc. Now, in my case, I don't think that's entirely true. I do as much talking as my clients do. Someone wish they could shut me up, I think. And I very often feel that the basic thing I have to offer them is my shared experience. Is out of my own experience, and to say that. So I am unorthodox in some ways. I mean, there are other therapists, I'm sure, who do that, but I don't think we're in the majority. I don't try to hide out behind the mask of in four modalities. I am quite capable of saying, yeah, I went through something like that when I was 10, and here's the way I handled it, or when I was 15, or this is the way I handled it. That self-disclosure becomes important. And I think that there are some people, though, who hide out behind their role of people helper and can feel very good about that, you see, because, well, they're doing good. See, they're do-gooders. We used to call them do-gooders. They're doing good, or they have the Messiah complex that can feed their ego, but they don't really let you know who they are behind that role. And, or the people, some people helpers tend to be mothers. They're going to dote on their kids, and they dote on their kids, but it's to the detriment. The kids can't really be their intimates because kids are not their equals. But they dote on the kids, but they're not intimate with their husbands, you see, and so on. So we have to be careful of that. Another barrier to intimacy that is really a very prominent one for people who lock themselves behind a wall are the people who are personally smug and self-righteous. If I come at you all the time from a position of superiority and prejudice, I prejudge already, you see, and I come at you from a position of I'm always in the right, whether I'm, you know, one of these people who thinks that I have the moral truth for the world and anybody else who doesn't agree with me is wrong, etc., then I never let you be you with me. I've already judged you. I've already put you in a category. I've already got you placed, and I'm not going to let you come in and disturb my equanimity. See, I can walk my own little tightrope, and it's usually tight. These people, are, again, tend to be uptight. Another one of those technical terms, as you know, that we use a lot. And that's another barrier. These people are very often very blocked. Because why? Because no matter what you say, I've already made up my mind. The disclosure of yourself isn't going to unbalance me in any direction. I'm already solidly here, you see, this way. So I don't learn anything new. I don't meet new people because I already judge them. They're already in categories. See? And that's too bad. That's another barrier to intimacy. Or we get the people who are rejection sensitive. I had a woman who thought she was a mole. Yeah. She had two, when she was brought, her boss found her working, she worked nights because that way she wouldn't have to meet anybody. And she worked nights in this office building on a big word processing machine. She ran this big equipment. And her boss discovered her there. He worked late one night and happened to come down and find her there and introduced himself, the big boss of all bosses in this particular firm. And she said, "You can't talk to me." I'm just a piece of this machinery. That's what she said. I'm just part of the equipment. And he decided that was a rather severe situation. And so he insisted that she come and see me. He was a former client of mine, so he was now alive. And oh, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how many dead people are walking around. Well, they're not dead. They're undead. They're undead, but they're not really alive, you know? They're still breathing, yeah, but they're not alive to the world and to what's going on in life. Yeah, it's just a formality. When they stop breathing, we can bury them, see? I had a 62-year-old man come into me once, and he looked like a mummy. He actually looked like a mummy. His skin was real tight and sort of parchment-like, and he had thin lips. And he said, I said, what brings you in? He said, I've chosen to live. I said, it's about time. I sent him to a physical therapist, who is my physical therapist, and I, with his permission, had said something about him to her, and she phoned me back right after his first appointment and said, you said this man was stiff as a board, because we were trying to unlock his emotions, you know, physically, among other things. And I said, isn't he? She said, hell, he's set in concrete. So he had been just undead for many, many years because of something that happened early on, and we got him to be free of that. And about 4 weeks into therapy, he brought his blonde, peroxide blonde wife in. She was a perky, positive thinker. And she had to meet me because she said, I don't know what you've been doing for Fred, but he's got a lot of spunk lately. At any rate, yeah, well, all we did was resuscitate him, you know. Back to my mole. She was not a bad-looking young lady, but she had suffered rejection. Now get this. Everybody's different. Everybody's different. And here was this person who lived alone. Nobody, not even her landlord, had been in her apartment for 10 years. She had no friends. She seldom visited her family, who did not live in this state. She had this job where she would meet nobody, and she had become so insulated in her own world, she felt she was a piece of machinery. She didn't talk to anybody. See? She was a mole. She told me, I said, did you really tell him you were a piece of the machine? You know. And she said, well, more often I feel like a mole because I work underground and in the dark. I said, oh. And we began to explore why she had cut herself off, locked herself in against the world. And it turned out when she was in the 3rd grade in her rural community where she was brought up, her family was a farming family, and she in the 3rd grade had invited a classmate girl home to spend a weekend at the farm. And they had had a wonderful weekend. It was absolutely fantastic weekend. And yet, and on Monday, the two of them went to school together, and the girl went back to her clique and didn't talk to her anymore and didn't associate with. They didn't have a friendship anymore. The girl went back to her own group of friends, and that was that. And this severely wounded her, you see. Now what happened? When she was 14, a cousin visited from the big city, male, and they became, quote, intimate. I don't mean sexually intimate, I mean intimate. They shared on a lot of levels. They went swimming together, they shared their dreams and aspirations, they talked a lot, they went horseback riding together, they did all kinds of fun things for 2 full weeks. She had never felt closer to anybody in her life than with this person. He went back to the city and didn't even send a thank you note. And so again, she felt terribly rejected. Nobody's ever going to do that to me again. So from then on, she just sealed herself off. You couldn't give yourself away to anybody. They just hurt you. They just dump you. See? So she had what we prefer to call rejection sensitivity. And in so doing, she built this whole wall around herself. She wasn't going to be hurt. She wasn't going to open up to anybody. You couldn't trust anybody not to. You open up that way and you feel delightful, and boom, they'll knock you off. Okay. She's now a minister in her church, youth minister, wonderful. Does good work because she discovered she wasn't a mole or a piece of machinery. Then there are other ways. When I talked about withdrawal, some people withdraw. I had a huge woman, big woman, and she had a little dinky husband. And they collect them. Some of these big ones collect these little ones. And she brought him in. She brought him in, and she sat him down, and she just thundered. They had had 11 children, and he had never been intimate with her. And he was not her, he didn't talk to her, he never spoke to her about anything that mattered. She needed more communication with him, she needed to have dialogue with him. She heard about couples who dialogue. They never dialogue. She knew they never dialogue, and he was never in, and she went on and on and on. And they had these motor vehicles out in their area that he worked on. He had this van he was working on, and this truck he was working on, and this car he was working on. He practically collected these clunkers that he'd work on, see? And he was always working out there, and he was never in there to talk to her or discuss anything he might have read, although she read more than he did, and she thundered about all this, you know. Yep. And when she finally shut up, you know, I turned to him, and I said, well, what about that? And he said, well, you know those trucks I'm working on? And she promptly said, yeah, those trucks. And she started in, and she went on for 8 minutes. I mean it. She went on for 8 full minutes about those trucks and how they were a major barrier to their dialoguing and da-da-da-da-da. And then when she stopped, and I just waited for her to wind down, because this time I didn't use one of my therapeutic interventions. You know, therapeutic intervention is when you say, shut up. Unless they're rural folk, and then you say, whoa there, hold it right. Stop, slow down. I just let her roll on, and when she had sort of calmed down again, having now used up another 8 minutes of the session, I said to him, you were saying. I didn't respond to her, I didn't say a thing about what she had said. I said to him, you were saying. And he said, well, I was saying about working on those vehicles out there. And she said, and we've got all those vehicles littering up the yard. And she went on for another 10 minutes. I mean it. I am not exaggerating. By the clock, and I'm not a psychiatrist, I was looking at that clock this time just to see how long it would take. And she went on barreling, just steamrolling on for 10 minutes, raving about those trucks and how he was always out there working on those trucks and getting all dirty and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I just let her wind down. I waited. I held my jaw shut. And I waited. And when she was finished, again I ignored everything she had said. And I turned to her husband and I said, now remember, she had used the first 12 or 15 minutes of the session to state the case. She had now used another 8 minutes, and now she had used another 11 or 12 minutes. I mean, that's a lot of time. That's almost half the session. And so I turned to him and again, and I said, before you were interrupted, you were trying to tell me something. And he said, well, I was trying to say that when I go out to work on those trucks, you know, those trucks, I mean, they're going to be in good shape. And she said, yeah, now back, he never talks to me. I've been reading it. And she started in again. And it happened another time. And then the time was up for the session. And I said to him and to her, I said, you know, you brought him in because he doesn't talk to you. I said, and I've carved out about 4, or maybe it was 5 now in retrospect, opportunities for him to talk, and invited him to talk. And then I turned to him and I said, do you ever feel like every time you open your mouth an avalanche of words hits you? I mean, do you ever feel you're in front of a steamroller? He said, that's why I work on those damn trucks. So that she was setting up, you see, herself, she was setting up a barrier to his being open with her, and at the same time was able to complain about his not talking back to her, you see. And if he, of course, was withdrawing because she was so powerful and so wordy that she'd just smother him in those words. So he had to go somewhere, and under a truck was the only way he could get out from under her. Okay. Hope you understand what I'm driving at there. There are other ways we can cut off people being intimate, and then we can even turn around and complain about it, and that's competitiveness. We live in a competitive society. We're all out, you know, we've been taught from this high at Little League to be competitive, you know. Yeah, so somebody comes to you and they're kind of tearful and they say, my cat died. And you say, you think that's bad? Why, I lost 3 cats in 2 years. One got hit by a truck, and then they tell all this story about how many cats they lost, yeah. Or, well, I'm not doing too well. I have this spastic. You got a spastic. I'll tell you what I had last year. You know, that'll put you. And we get into this competition. What happens? Well, we shut off the other person sharing with us. We hit them with, I can tell a better one. Notice how we do it even with jokes. It's required real discipline on my part. Now I no longer remember jokes. See, I don't remember jokes at all. Somebody tells you a joke, and what's your instinctive reaction? I got a better one. You see? And when we can do it on even that level, why do that? See? Why not just let the person enjoy having told you a joke, laugh with it, and say, wonderful, and an hour later come back with, you know, that story you told reminded me of one. But if I say, I got a better one, and I hit you now with mine, I don't even give you the opportunity to enjoy having told me that story and me enjoy your having shared it with me. You see what I mean? Yeah. It's very, very critical to be aware of our competitiveness in that area, see? We do that a lot. And what it does is be a barrier to intimacy. Or we're simply not paying attention. One evening I came home from a lecture in the Bay Area, and this was when Myra was still alive, and there was Myra was sitting up, and she had a pot of coffee on, and she was obviously sitting up to chat with me, and it was now about 11:30 at night, and that was beyond her bedtime. And she said that her brother's wife had just left. And I said, oh, well, that was expected. You still with me? Yeah. Anybody with eyes could have seen that was going to happen. She said, well, Mom's upset. It was obvious. Myra was also upset, right? But she said, well, my mom's upset. Well, I said, everybody could see the handwriting on the wall there, da-da-da-da-da, and I stormed in with my speech, you see, about this. And Myra got her coffee cup and finished her coffee and said, well, I guess I'll go to bed. And it was after she was in bed, I thought, what was that all about? See, I have a saving grace. I have 2 or 3 of them, but this is one of them. When I do a dumb thing, I say, what happened there? And try to figure it out, see? And I thought, uh-oh, I missed the boat. Now, I had just been in the East Bay talking on communications. I had given a wonderful, wonderful presentation to engaged couples who it was an exercise in futility. You know, I was talking on communication to engaged couples. They had both said yes at the same time, so they knew that there was no point in listening to this talk. You know, they had communicated, right? Yeah. And I came home, and I was tired. I'm not making excuses. But here I was in a situation where I didn't get the communication. So I went upstairs, and Myra was already asleep. So in the morning, I said, boy, I really missed the boat last night. She said, too late, I've taken care of it. And she meant it. But what was happening there was I was missing a signal, which was, hey, I'm hurting because of what's just happened in the family. We're all distressed. And all I had done was come on what? Objective, knowledgeable. Anybody could see that was going to happen. Da-da-da-da. Moved it off on the intellectual level where no feelings take place. There are a lot of, that's really infuriating. You say, I'm really in great pain, and he says, if he's an attorney or an engineer, there is no objective reason for your hurting today. I mean, there's a barrier to intimacy for you, you know. So if it's not competitiveness, then very often it's we'll intellectualize it, we'll make objective statements about it. It's infuriating, you know, for people who are trying to share on the intimate level of emotions. And that's where intimacy occurs. You can tell me your thoughts, but you may have stolen those from, God forbid, Time magazine or someplace. But when you share your feelings, you're telling me about you. That's a real intimate communication. And if I shut that off with a judgment, we're back to prejudging, or with a moralistic sermon, or with some objective statement, well, I don't see, if I discount your feelings, see, that's what's called discounting other people's feelings, well, you have no right to feel that way, or count your blessings, or some other dumb statement, then you'll learn there's no point trying to talk to me on that level because I'm not going to be receptive. I'll just push you away. Those are barriers to intimacy and barriers to intimate communication. Okay, so another one is my projectionism. And by projectionism, I mean this. There are a lot of people out there, especially young romantic lovers, who will look at another person and they don't see the person. They've got a white screen in front of them, and they project on the person everything they want that person to be for them. You're perfect. I said to Myra one day, she said, if you ever say that to me again, I'll slap your face. Yeah, that knocked out projectionism right there. But most people Most people, most romantic love is rooted in that projectionism that you're going to meet all my needs, you're perfect, you're this, you're that, I'll translate your vices to virtues, etc., or I'll project on you negative stuff. I mean, if it's not a romantic situation, the reverse of that is I will project upon you my feelings and assume you feel what I feel, which is always a mistake, because you're different from me. Right now, we're sharing in the same experience. We're talking, right? I'm talking with you, you're right here in this room, but you see, I have a better view than you have. You're prettier than I am. And the experience is totally different because we're two different persons. We're sharing this experience, but it's this whole thing behind you, the back situation, mine is different. You're looking at a different world than I'm looking at. See, you're a different person, different history. Yeah. Now, if we keep this up, we'll be this is going to get scandalous. Anyway, you see what I mean? Yeah. So that I can't presume to know what you're feeling towards me. But if I'm projecting in a negative sense, I might very well decide she doesn't like me, or she's finding me too da-da-da. And if I do that, then what have I just done? I've set myself up for an emotional response to you that's totally out of sync with what may be going on over there. See? I remember when I went to, and it's always an experience to go to your high school reunion. Now, I was a lonely kid in high school. Partly because until my junior year, I was the littlest kid in every class, so I had no social life. You know, that's where you learn to read a lot. And you learn to, I mentioned this before, I think that when you're the short, they say, last person chosen for the team always, they say, we got to choose him, you got another one, we'll make a whole one. Yeah. And they always put you in right field where nobody hits, and then they put a pinch hitter in for you when it's your turn to come to bat, get some big guy. Well, then you learn 4 things. You learn how to read a lot because you don't have any social life, because girls don't want to, go out with somebody who's so short. 2, you learn to talk to girls because you're sitting on the bench with them a lot on the sidelines. 3, you learn to run real fast because you tend to mouth off at the big guys. And 4, you learn to talk real fast because sometimes they outrun you. And those are 4 assets that I have turned into economic assets, by the way. See, I use them all today. I run around a lot, I talk real fast, I read a lot, and I talk to girls. Okay. Back at the fort, how do we get onto that? In that process, I was going to make a point with that. What was the point I was going to make? Do you remember?
Projecting.
Yeah, projecting. Okay. That's right. So I was alone. You're paying attention. That's good. See, I don't need interruptions. I interrupt myself. In high school, by the time I got to high school, I was kind of a loner. See, lived in my own little world a lot. And do you know what? When I went to my 25th high school reunion, it was amazing how all those people had aged. I literally went there and I stepped out of the room looking to. I thought sure I was in the wrong place. See, this looked like some sort of geriatrics ward, and not my. And then I discovered it was really the right place. I don't know how they had done that to themselves. But I began to get feedback from some of the people I'd gone to high school with, who were now sort of delighted to know me. And they said things like, well, you were such a snob. Or, I really wanted to know you, but I figured you weren't that friendly. Or they said, I'd see you going down the hall, and I think you would be somebody I'd really like to know, but I just found you unapproachable. Now, what were they doing? I wasn't unapproachable at the time. I was a lonely kid at the time. What they were doing was projecting upon me their notions of where I was at, and therefore cutting off the possibility of becoming friends at that time. And a lot of us do that. See, you're walking down the hall, and I say, hi, and you go, and I say, he hates me. I've just done something wrong. He's going to fire me tomorrow morning, and so on. That's all projection. For all I know, you were backing out of your driveway and ran over your dog. And you're just full of the pain of that, and I mean that. And you're full of the pain of that, and you didn't even hear me say hi. But I've projected on you immediately all sorts of interpretations that then distance me from you. Hope I'm making sense. The other way to have a buried intimacy, and then we're going to get on overcoming this stuff. The other way to have a buried intimacy is to have a notion of perfection. That I'm not either about myself, I'm not good enough for you to care about me. See, therefore, any interest you're showing is going to be, you've got some ulterior motive. See, something I can do for you, or something that, or how to put this, something you want from me, or you just don't know me well enough, that's why you can make that, that overture. Or I look at you and I demand perfection. And in so doing, I keep you, see, nobody's good enough for me to want to marry, nobody's good enough for me to, this person's not perfect enough. I get into relationships if I'm a perfectionist, and I decide I see flaws, you see, and I pay attention to the flaws, I put those up front, and that'll keep you distant from me. Then I won't involve myself on a deeper level. These are all ways of distancing, you see. And romantic perfectionists particularly do that. The projectionists, as I say very often, that's one of the things that leads to disillusion in a relationship where the initial impact was, you're perfect, you see. And along with the other part of that, which very often goes along with it, which is, you're going to meet all my needs. See? So that when I say I love you, I mean your weakness makes me feel strong. Or I love you meaning your ability to socialize allows me to stay shy. Or I love you meaning your shyness allows me to flower, you see, and all of this sort of thing. When what I'm really saying is, I don't love you, I love what you bring to me. See? That's called object-centered love. Okay, those are all ways. Now, back and forth. When we break through this, as I say, when we break through some of these barriers through our awareness of what's going on, our awareness of the situation, then what happens is we allow ourselves to come out. But we have to be aware of ourselves. We have to begin by appreciating who we are. And we have to begin by saying, by getting acquainted with me is one of the ways I can then trust me to you. See, and to know where I stand, and to appreciate various things. See, there are people who come up to me in airports, because some of these films show up on PBS, I can always tell where, because I'm going through certain airports, and people will come up and say, "You're him." And I say, "If you say so." And they say, "But you're too tall." That's because the cameras, they shrink you to get you in the box, And and I say, "Well, then maybe I'm not him." And that throws them a little bit. And they say, "Oh, come on, you really are him, aren't you?" And I say, "Well, you're going to have to make up your mind, because I've got to catch a plane." And they say, "Well, give me a hug." And I give them a hug, and they say, "See, I knew you were him." The point I'm making is, if they're in doubt about me, or if I'm in doubt about me and they say, "You're him," I might say, "Maybe I'm not," if I don't know me. But if you're comfortable in that, then what happens is, as I say, all of this energy that went into locking me in gets to go out. And so even if the social role I'm in, it's a role in which I am myself, or the cliche level, one is oneself there, one is not using that stuff to hide behind. Okay. I hope all of that's clear. We'll erase this board. Fulton Sheen used to have an angel do this. Those of you who are old enough to remember him, he had an angel do this. Yeah, the board would end up. Yeah. Whenever I think of that, I think of G.K. Chesterton's remark that angels can fly because they take themselves so lightly. And I think it's really critical, if we're going to really enjoy life, that we must not take ourselves too seriously in that area. Okay. Let me see what we have in my notes here. Oh yeah, that's pretty good too. There are two other ways that I should mention before we get on with this about barriers. And one of them is the E-woman. You've heard of type A personalities? There's also the E-woman. It's a pretty good term. You know what I mean? No. The E-woman is the woman who tries to be everything to everybody. She's going to be perfect mother to the kids. She's going to be perfect wife to the husband. She's going to be off in the mother's club and doing PTA or the church council or parish council, whatever it is. She's going to do all these things, and she's trying to do everything. And the superwoman, and this is especially common today. It's a new syndrome. We have that it's very common now, especially since we have about 54 married women with perfectly able-bodied husbands at home who are carrying two jobs, two full-time jobs, one at home and one at work. And he's not, helpful at home because he's watching TV in the recliner after a hard day at work. And so when she's doing that, that's a buried intimacy because I'm being everything to everybody else and I'm out of touch with me. And those women begin to burn out pretty soon. And they don't get to know themselves because they're so busy being in the roles. And it's especially bad news if they never had a period of independence from their original family before they got married. A lot of middle-aged women particularly went right from their parents' home or very shortly thereafter to a marriage. And so they were relating as daughter to mother and father or big sister to the family or whatever, and then they moved right into being wife to a husband and then mother to babies, and they never found out who they were. That me becomes very important. I can't very well reveal me to you if I don't know who I am. And also, the dynamic that's established is the way in which you and I get to know one another is when I do reveal myself to you, you then feel free to reveal yourself back. The other thing that's going on is the awareness as I get better and better acquainted with me that you're another me. That we both have the same capacity for laughing and crying. We both have the same capacity for pain or joy or delight. That we both have the same capacity for dreaming or for having nightmares and all the rest. That you are another me. In Christian theology, it used to be called a doctrine of the mystical body, that we're all members of the same body, you see. When I begin to appreciate the fact that you're another me, I don't look upon the necessity for you to be perfect, because I'm not perfect, see? And I also, because I know I always stand in need of forgiveness, am ready to always be ready to forgive you. Those are conditions for intimacy that begin almost immediately. And when I say forgive you, I don't mean in the sense of moral superiority that some people have of, I'll forgive you, you worm, Don't you ever do that again. But rather the sort of forgiveness that comes about because we all know we all stand in need of forgiveness all the time. And so in any relationship, there are going to be things we do that we want to be forgiven for at one time or another, you see, and to have, the other person let go of that. Then on the other side of that, the E-woman is the passive-aggressive male. There are also passive-aggressive females, but most females don't quite do it that way. But passive-aggressive behavior in coping series, I remember spending a little time on that when I said we learned it back when we were, back in the terrible twos, when we said yes and did no. Happens when you're being just locomoting to refresh your memory. Some people look blank there. And when you're first locomoting, at 18 months or 2 years in there somewhere, walking on your own hind legs, discovering the world, you've heard one word for 18 months or 2 years. You've heard one word a lot, and that word is no. Now, what happens if the giants in your world, they have one of two responses to this very often. One of the major ones of many women is to lean over a little girl and say, nice girls don't say no, which accounts for the enormous percentage of unwed mothers in high school. They're being nice. But the other one is, don't you dare say no to me. You see, and the giants insist that you have to go along with what they want. So you learn to say yes and do no. And I pointed that out in detail in that other series. But I'm refreshing your memory because what happens when we're talking about intimacy is, what happens if you only say yes to me in our relationship? If you've learned, in order to get along, you think that in order to keep me happy, you'll agree with whatever I want. So you agree to this, and you agree to that, and you agree to this, and you agree to that. But what happens when you don't want to agree to some of these things? You're quote, being self-sacrificing? Well, you can put a halo on your head and say that. But the fact is, when you're doing it that way, you're also going to be building up an enormous amount of resentment. See? The one test of a saint is, are they happy? Because if they ain't happy, they ain't saints. See, because heaven is where we're going to enjoy that great joy, and you got to get ready for it on earth. And so if you ain't going to be happy here, you ain't going to be happy there. I get to use ain't. I write novels. I have a poetic license. The point I'm making, though, is a lot of people impede intimacy in a relationship because I can't get to know who you are if I don't know your boundaries. And the way I get to know your boundaries is by your ability to feel free to say no. No, I don't want to go there. No, I don't want to do this. No, I wouldn't care to do that. You see? And that's one way. That's how you define yourself. K-N-O-W, knowing you, it comes out of your no. But if you're always saying yes to me, then how do I know when your yes means yes? And passive-aggressive behavior comes out of where I say as husband to a wife, yeah, I'll do that because I'm going to be agreeable, you see. And then I forgot. Or I procrastinate so long that you do it, and when you're getting angry at me, I say, but I told you I'd do it. You know, but I'm going to do it on my schedule, not yours, you see, that sort of thing. And so I don't give myself permission right up front to say no. So what happens? If I do that, you never get to know me. You don't know where I really stand. See, and it's very, very important that we monitor our yeses and nos, because those are the ways other people contact us. Other people get to inside and find out where I am, okay? Now, very often when people come to me with problems in relationships, married couples or single people, they come to me, I have to begin with the me, with them, inside. And that's when we start looking at the self-image they have. I stand them in front of a mirror. Say only good things about that beautiful woman in the mirror there standing next to Clayton Barbeau. And they go, I never look in the mirror except for zits. I've had women cry. I've had men cry. I've had men say, I only look in the mirror to shave. I don't like looking in the mirror. You know, that's self-image. That's self-image. The fact of the matter is, there's only one you on the face of this earth. You are incomparable. Nobody else on the face of this earth is as beautiful as you, because you're the only you around. Comparing you to anybody else is comparing apples and oranges. Understand that to begin with. So you're absolutely unique. Okay? Now, when that begins, I encourage such people. Encourage just simply means I put courage in them to go off, and I give them homework. I give a lot of homework. That's the way I get rid of clients. Get rid of clients. Give them homework. I don't have to see them so often. And I say, now, for your homework this week, every day I want you at least once, whether you're fully clothed to go out or whether you're naked after the shower, to look in a mirror. Look in a full-length mirror, and I want you to see only good things in the mirror. Why? You know, well, for a lot of them, they were taught that was almost a heresy. See, to look in a mirror and see good things. They were supposed to look in the mirror to see their faults. Or in puberty, that hairy time we talked about once before. Puberty comes from pubescere, to get hairy. That's what it means. Hairy time. In puberty, 70% of kids have zits, and they look in the mirror for zits all the time, and they never get over it. People then get accustomed to looking in the mirror to see what they can repair. See what makeup they can put on in order not to look so awful. Well, you look great just the way you are because you're only you. And once I start encouraging people to look in the mirror and see themselves as acceptable, as beautiful human beings the way they are, the good things about them, then we're building that first of the foundation stones necessary to their feeling good about other people saying, you're really wonderful, you know, you're really terrific. Because if they don't begin to see that real beautiful them, then what happens when somebody says you're really beautiful is they say, wonder what she's after, wonder what he's after. Oh, they're just saying that. They're just, and so what that's called is discounting. Discounting is when you say something and I cut it down to about 10% of its value. Or I delete it entirely. I let it go in one ear and out the other, and you never hear it. Okay? And so, or I never hear it. So then I wonder why I always feel so terrible about myself, or whatever. Why? I never let any water come into the desert to let the flowers bloom in there. So that's the beginning. That's self-image. But self-esteem, remember earlier I said about being worthwhile? So self-esteem, though, gets damaged when I have learned only to examine my conscience for my sins. Many people only were taught to look at what they do wrong. It goes back to school, and the paper is handed back for all the wrong answers. Not the right ones, the wrong ones. And then in our spirituality, we're taught to examine our conscience and ask God's forgiveness for all the things we did wrong. We don't say, thank you, God, for all the things I did right today. See? And it really, I don't know, I'm going to tell you something. I never see anybody in therapy who thinks too good of themselves. I really don't. I mean, even that, if somebody does come in and they've got that kind of ego problem, they do that, they're doing that big thing because they feel lousy about themselves. Many overachievers are people who are trying to prove by external rewards that they're okay. And the reason some of them overachieve, who get one award after another. I had a client who had one of the longest listings in Who's Who, all kinds of awards. And the last one never made him feel good about himself, so he had to go get another one. It's like some regular students who are out there and they've got 7, advanced degrees. The last one didn't prove they were competent, so they get one in another field. Also, it's a way of avoiding getting involved in real life. You stay in the academic world that way. But I'm not kidding. People do that. They're barriers to real contact with themselves. So what I'm driving at, though, is one of the things I then do is I say, okay, now what I want you to do is I want you during the day, during the following week, before you come in next time, every day I want you to look at all the things you do right. I want you to say, boy, I turned that doorknob just perfectly. You know, there are a few million people in this country who wish they could turn a doorknob as well as you do. Literally. Yeah. Or I really tied my shoes well. See? You didn't even think about tying your shoes this morning. You tied them beautifully. See? And we do about 20, 50 things before breakfast right. Combing our hair, brushing our teeth, getting dressed, making the bed, answering the phone. All kinds of things we do right and beautifully and handle that well and this well and so on. Then we get down to breakfast and we turn around suddenly to pick up the newspaper and we knock over the coffee cup and we say, I never do anything right. I'm just a goof off. See, I'm just no good it's just terrible. I'm a klutz. See, it's not true. David Burns, in his book, The Intimate Connections, calls that telescoping, where we turn the telescope around, so that the good things we do look real small, and then we do something bad and we turn it around the other way and make it real large. And it's a way we keep our own sense of our worthwhileness, our own sense of our self-esteem low. And if I have a low sense of self-esteem, then I'm not going to trust myself with you. I'm going to hide out because I figure if I let you in there, you won't like me. You'll go, ooh, you're terrible, you're awful. What's really always intrigued me is the degree to which each of us thinks we're the only cracked teacup in the set. Everybody else is adequate to the human condition but me. And I cannot reassure people often enough that as a therapist, I can tell you with great authority, everybody's cracked. And that in point of fact, we're going to meet on the intimate level only when we meet in terms of our vulnerabilities. That it is not in terms of my getting up here or your getting up here and saying about all your successes, here's all my successes, here are all my awards, look at my trophies, look at this plaque, look at this one, Yeah. That's not going to help you any. Because that's all, part of that's the social role or whatever it is out there, these things. They don't tell you a damn thing about me. Darn thing. They really don't. The only way you can meet me is when I start sharing my stumblings and my failings and my vulnerabilities with you, you see. And when we do that, then we are setting the foundation for, we have to feel courageous enough to do that. And that begins with my understanding you're another me, and you've probably done dumb things too. See? There are parents out there who are trying to set a good example for the kids by never telling them anything they did wrong. So the kids never talk to them about anything that's going on in the real world, because in the real world, wrong things happen. So they talk to their peers, or they talk to Uncle George or somebody else who is quite willing to, probably because he tipples too much, talk about his misspent youth, and they can learn from him. Or if I come on to you with only my successes and my virtue ribbons and my medals of honor and all of those things, you see, all the good stuff, you don't know me. See, those are my dress clothes, if you will. You want to get to know me, you have to hear me talk about my failures or how I did this or that, and vice versa. We have to meet in those soft spots. See, that's where we really meet, in that communion, if you will, of our weakness, our mutual humanity, not in virtue of we'll stack up successes, but in virtue of our humanity. Then we can meet on an intimate level when we lay down all the armor, when we let go of all that stuff. And one of the really sad things, I was in New York last week in Binghamton, which is a lovely little town there, Broome County. And the last time I was there was a little over a year ago, and I talked to the hospice movement. And there were 300 people there, and some of them were ill, and some of them were recent survivors of a loss, but most of them were working with the dying. And I said, it's really terribly unfortunate that so many people only learn how to live when they're under sentence of death, when they're confronting death. And what I meant by that was twofold, and we spent a whole day talking about that. And it was a wonderful day, a lot of fun. Yeah, really, it's absurd the way we handle our lives, you know, and so it's really rather funny what we do. But we spent a day talking about that because, one, when I know I have a limited amount of time, I don't waste it telling you about all my successes. When I'm vulnerable now, all the awards do not help. All the money in the bank doesn't help. The clothes are gone. They've got you in a silly little outfit that shows your bottom if you could get out of bed. And, you know, all these indignities are being perpetrated, and it comes down to very basic sort of stuff. You know, in that vulnerable situation of confronting death, people learn how to live, which is in the present moment. And what comes to the fore? Being honest with one another. What comes to the fore? Loving. What comes to the fore? Making peace. What comes to the fore? Forgiving. It's beautiful. You enter the room of some people who are, quote, dying, and you find them more alive than they ever were when they were heading the corporation. And what are they doing? They're telling people they love them. They're meeting people on that level. They don't want to waste their time. They're also, you know, open to what's going on around them. Am I making sense? Now, one of the things I keep trying to do is to get people to live while they're alive, and not, you know, because it's all too short anyway, see? Yeah. Yeah. And it's really critical that we begin to appreciate then ourselves and understand that I meet you in my weaknesses. I meet you in my vulnerabilities far more than in all the facades and social roles. So that when I do that, it liberates me. I have no fear then. See, I remember I was due to go to Wyoming to give a talk in a rather controversial 10th annual seminar of a program up there, and there were people who did not like this particular program. It dealt with sex, and they didn't like that. Yeah, they wouldn't have been on Earth if it hadn't been for sex, but they didn't like it. And I got a call, and it said, there are people up here who are unfriendly. They're unfriendly to what our group is trying to do, and they've decided they're going to dig up all the dirt on you. See, you're going to dig up, and they're going to discredit you. And I said, wonderful. I said, that's fantastic. That's really great. If they get anything real juicy, send it down to me. And the woman who was phoning me said, she was rather nervous, she said, you don't seem scared at all or worried at all. And I said, well, one, I haven't met an unfriendly in my life. But two, I said, I've been rather feeling rather dull lately, so if they send something real juicy, it might jazz up my life, see? And I said, she said, but you don't seem concerned. I mean, I said, well, I'm either the most ethical or the most discreet so-and-so you've ever talked to, and I'm not going to tell you which. Keep them guessing. But the thing was, I really didn't fear that disclosure because I've told most people what I've been doing wrong lately. You know? Yeah. We've just run out of time for this segment. I want to thank all of you again for your kind attention, and we'll be back for the next segment where we'll deal more with how we really develop communications with other people. Thank you very, very much.